Go ahead and share my screen. Well, as I mentioned, it's good to see you all again this week. I'm glad that y'all stuck with it for a couple of weeks, and this is the last of our 3 sessions. So tonight we're going to finish up the motions that we didn't go through last week, as we ran out of time to get through all of them, which I knew that would be somewhat lengthy to cover all of them, just their purpose and a few examples. And so we do have 2 different groups of motions that we're going to go through, as well as talk about electronic meetings, which is very timely. When I talked about it a few years ago in different formats, it wasn't near as popular as it is now because of what we went through the last year with so many groups not being able to meet in person, and electronic meetings becoming very important and very much a part of, you know, work life and business life, and these associations that have had to work through electronic meetings. So we'll talk about electronic meetings, as well as bylaws and constitution of organizations, and some committees and their functions as well. And again, if y'all have questions along the way, comments, examples of something, or need clarification, just jump right in. Oops. There's my record reminder. I just wanted to review before we begin that on the screen I have the list of motions that I refer to. If I'm leading a meeting, I have this with me. It's easy to just reference. They're broken out in their different categories and those important things that we need to know about each. If it requires a second, is it debatable, is it amended, and the vote required. And if you know those about the motions, you can get through a lot much easier. And instead of committing it to memory, you can have that handy reference sheet instead of having the big book to try to look up things on the fly. I thought we'd also address the steps in making a main motion. Once again, I think if, as a part of this training, we can learn the proper steps and how to follow through. As I watched several meetings in different, you know, organizations and formats, I still see errors from the group, from the chairman, in just going through the simple basics of how a main motion should be handled. So I think that it's important that we go over this again, and hopefully it just sort of becomes part of your natural memory about, oh, that person needs to do this before they move on to this step. So the steps in making a main motion, again, the floor should be open for business, with the chairman saying, is there any business to come before the group? Because the main motion may only be made when there's nothing else on the floor. Remember, it's the lowest ranking of all motions and cannot be made when anything else is going on. So if we have an empty floor for business, a member may rise and address the chair by saying, Mr. or Madam Chairman. Once the chair recognizes that person by saying Mr. Overall, then you may state your motion. And the proper way to state a motion is with the words I move, not I make a motion. It's I move. I move that we have a picnic on Saturday. Another member seconds the motion, and then the chair needs to restate the motion for the group to understand exactly what we're talking about, and also to help the secretary or the recorder clarify what is being written down in the minutes. So if the motion is that we have a picnic on Saturday, someone seconds the motion as chairman, I would state the motion has been made and properly seconded that we have a picnic on Saturday. Is there any discussion? The reason I'm asking for discussion, this motion is amendable and debatable. So the simple thing to do is just ask for discussion. As the discussion is finishing up, as chairman, if I notice that no one else is having any other discussion, I can simply state, if there is no further discussion, we will proceed to vote. All those in favor of the main motion that we have a picnic on Saturday, please signify by raising your hand. All those opposed, please signify by raising your hand. The ayes have it. and the motion is adopted if it passes. So those are, once again, the proper steps in making a main motion.
Michael, I don't even know how to really ask what I want to ask. Let me just explain.
Yeah.
It's relatively common practice in the organization that I will likely be becoming chair of. It's common practice for somebody to look at the agenda, and the chairman looks at the agenda and he says, okay, the first item of business before us today is Amy's thoughts about the time cards. I'm making that up. And Amy, tell us about your time card idea. And she would make some kind of series of statements. Discussion is what I'm not wanting to say, but she would make some kind of support for this idea, speech, and then others would theoretically jump in whenever she took a breath. And that's been frustrating to me. So let me make this question as much of a question as I can. The way this should be going is I, as the chairman, would call on Amy to present her idea, and then we'd move forward. What's your thoughts?
Is this a board meeting, an association? I mean, how small is the group? Is this actually more or less like a board or like an overall organization?
It's a representative senate is what it is. And there's 22 people if everybody shows up.
Okay. So it's not everybody that paid membership. This is like an elected board, or they're appointed in some way. So
it's a representative, sir.
It's a representative senate. Is that what you were saying?
Yes, sir.
So it's more or less functioning like a board, I guess. We'd have to look at the bylaws, and that's the way most businesses is probably handled, exactly what you said, because it's items that are on the agenda. Very rarely do we have some just fresh out of the blue, like I mentioned, let's have a picnic. It would probably already be on the agenda that let's talk about doing a fun activity or a picnic or whatever. And that's when it gets a little confusing to people in the group. What are we actually discussing and voting on? So it's perfectly fine if that's an item on the agenda that we're discussing time cards, whether we're going to a new system or doing away with it, it's going to be the honor system, whatever it might be. And exactly like you said, people will go ahead and jump in discussion about, well, that's the worst idea I've ever heard, or that's a great idea, or I've got this, or this is the way my brother does it at his work. And you get all these random thoughts, and it can go for quite a while. And there's really no motion out there to do anything. So then if there ever does become a motion, people are confused as to what we are voting on, what we're discussing, and what the secretary should write down. Is that sort of what you're, and how's the proper way to do that? Is that basically what you're asking? Well, I guess it is okay for that discussion to take place, but at some point in time as chairman, for the sake of the meeting moving forward and to going through the agenda items, it would be okay to ask. I mean, especially if Amy is the one that started it and she's been going for 5 minutes, you might say, Amy, thank you for your comments. Would you like to put something in the form of a motion for the group? And she's probably going to say, well, yeah, that's why I've been talking for 5 minutes. And so she's going to say, well, I want that in a motion, after that 5 minutes. So we need to really tighten it up and say, okay, what is your motion? What would you like to say? And as chairman, a lot of times it doesn't have to be as formal as the book says, like a Congress or a legislative type assembly. You can try to help the participants out and say, so basically what you're saying is you want this new time card system in place that's run by XCI and to start next April. Is that what you're trying to relate to us? I mean, if so, would you please put that in the form of a motion? And then you'll probably have to help her say, I move, that sort of stuff. So yeah, as chairman, you can help cut down some of that discussion and move the meeting forward by simply asking, would you like to put that in the form of a motion? Or because, just a lot of preliminary discussion does happen before ideas take place and get put in the form of a motion. And that gets very confusing. Most meetings I sit in, when we have business like that, people really don't know what the motion is. It has to be reread before we vote on it. What are we even voting on? Because they talked for 10 minutes before we actually had a motion. So if that was kind of the format of the group and how they'd always done things, I might be aware of that and try to rein that in on the front end and be proactive about it to help cut down on some of the confusion and some of the time, and then keep that discussion under the main motion itself where it belongs, if that makes sense. So how you could effectively, be nice and be democratic about it and not cut someone off, because, if it's an item on the agenda, we're discussing it, there may not be a motion that comes out of it. But if it's clear and obvious that there is going to be, I would, as chairman, go ahead and ask for that so we can get it out there, and then we can go through our typical rules of, how to handle a motion. Because otherwise, if there's not a motion on the floor and Amy's just talking, the rules of debate don't apply. She could talk for 30 minutes if no one asks her to stop, because the 10-minute rule isn't in effect because we're not in the middle of any type of motion. That only applies when we have a motion on the floor. Yes, Amy.
So it is okay for the chair to kind of guide a motion, like as long as he's not stating it from the get-go, he can restate what he thinks he hears.
Yes,
but,
yes.
Okay, because we have in our agendas, we have like new business and action items that we usually try to keep all of our actions, right up front top. But then we have, just to fill some space, we have discussion items, and sometimes discussion items obviously end up leading to a motion being made. But so it's okay that chair does lead them to a motion. Okay.
Absolutely. I would think that a good chair would want to do that, just to, if it's obvious that everybody's talking that, we should have a time clock system. We should be doing this. We should have been doing this forever. And you don't even have to address it to Amy. If you've had 2 or 3 people that just gave short discussion, you could say, at this time, the chair would entertain a motion on this topic. Would someone like to make a motion? Something like that. But that's probably more common than the way we see it in the book, where people just stand up and make a motion. There's a lot of preliminary discussion. And, if you got a lengthy agenda and it's an item that has probably already been discussed, that, hey, we're going to have a time clock. Let's go ahead and get that, in the form of a motion. And then, if we don't like it, we can vote to change it by amending it, or we can just vote it down and whatever. All right. Yeah, good questions. Good examples, because that, is the real world. So the steps of making a main motion are listed. And again, it's pretty good to commit those kind of to memory if you're serving as chairman, so you don't forget a step. And if I wasn't real comfortable with it, I might even have me a cheat sheet beside my motion sheet as well to list the steps of a motion. It's not uncommon for a chairman to forget to ask for a second, because they are so worried about what was the motion and how am I going to repeat it, that sort of thing. So sometimes we lose our steps in there. And so I might have a list of the steps of a motion right beside of me as well, so I don't forget to include all parts. All right, we've already had an example of a main motion tonight. So these are the classes of the motions. We went through the main motion last week, privileged motions, subsidiary motions, and we've got 2 final, and these are short ones, and they won't take us very long to go through, but these are incidental motions and questions that bring another back before the assembly. So they're not really categorized. The only categories of motions are the main motion, privileged motions, and subsidiary motions. And then we have all other motions, basically. So these incidental motions, kind of as the name implies, are kind of incidental. And so let's take a look at the incidental motions. Yeah. So they relate to pending business, something that's already in front of the assembly or in front of the group, rather than directly to the main motions. They're all secondary motions. That means they can only be made when a main motion is already on the floor, unless they are set up as an incidental main motion. So a point of order. This is employed when a member thinks that the rules of the assembly are being violated. And sometimes it's through just innocent neglect, and sometimes it could be purposeful on the part of the chairman if we don't have a real good chairman that, you know, has their own hidden agendas trying to get something through quickly. But a point of order is when someone thinks that a rule is not being enforced in parliamentary law, and they want to bring that in front of the group to the chairman to say, hey, you're not following the rules. I have a point of order. I'm asking you to follow the rules, basically is what it's saying. If we look on our list, this individual can interrupt a speaker. So if someone else has the floor and is speaking, I could jump up and say, Mr. Chairman, I rise to a point of order. And at that point, the chairman should stop whatever else is going on and say, Mr. Speaker, state your point. Because now I have gathered the floor through this pretty intense motion. At that point, I would state, you know, what I thought was violated. So let me read an example to you. And after that, the chairman should make a ruling. I think I have an example here. It's easier for me to read an example instead of trying to talk one off in my head. Let's say that we have a main motion that's pending before the assembly that our 4-H club participate in the June Dairy Month. During discussion, a member moves to lay this motion on the table. The chair receives a second to the motion to lay on the table and calls for discussion. Now, we went over lay on the table last week. Remember, it's not debatable or amendable, but the chair just called for discussion on the motion to lay on the table. So an observant member realized that the motion to lay on the table is not debatable and not amendable. Therefore, the following comments are made. Mr. Chairman, I rise to a point of order. The chairman says, state your point. A motion to lay on the table is undebatable and not amendable. It needs to go to vote without discussion. So the chairman, realizing that they were incorrect, states something to the effect, I stand corrected. The motion to lay on the table that we participate in June Dairy Month will now come to an immediate vote. So basically, it's just an opportunity for someone in the audience to correct the chairman when they make a parliamentary mistake. So point of order is trying to correct on a parliamentary mistake. The follow-up to this is called an appeal. This allows members of the assembly to appeal a decision of the chair. So just as that case was, the motion to lay on the table is not debatable and not amendable, and the chairman corrected themselves and did the appropriate action. If they had not, or if some people did not think that they had followed the correct protocol in correcting the action, then they can appeal that decision of the chair. And that's what the motion to appeal is. Because basically the chair made a decision that, yes, your point of order was correct, so therefore I will correct the action that was taken. Now, if someone disagrees that the chairman made the right decision, then they can appeal that decision. And if we look on our list again, to appeal the decision of a chair, you can interrupt the speaker. So you could pop right up and say, Mr. Chairman, I appeal the decision. It does not require a second. It can be debated, and it's not amendable. We talked about this one during the rules of debate. The chairman has the opportunity to actually participate in discussion on the appeal. They typically should not participate in discussion in an overall organizational meeting. Now, in the case of an appeal, they are explaining why they made their decision and why this appeal should not be sustained or should be sustained. So the chairman has the opportunity to speak first and they have the opportunity to speak last. So they get to speak 2 times during this appeal discussion. All other members only get to speak 1 time. So let me give you a scenario on how this one will work. A member makes a main motion that our class have a cookout. Before receiving a second, the chair calls for discussion on the main motion. An alert member notices the breach and rises to a point of order, stating, "The main motion did not receive a second." The chair hastily replies, "I am sorry, Mr. Speaker, but your point is not sustained since a main motion does not require a second." At this point, it becomes obvious that the chair is just trying to push this motion through the assembly because he is ignoring or because he ruled incorrectly on the point of order. The procedure the assembly should use to keep the chair from improperly controlling the meeting is an appeal from the decision of the chair. Therefore, a member rises after the chair rules on the point of order and the following occurs. "Mr. Chairman, I appeal from the decision of the chair." The chairman asks, "Is there a second?" And if someone seconds it, the chairman says, "Those who agree with the decision of the chair," well, actually, they would ask for discussion, and then we would vote. "Those who agree with the decision of the chair, please raise your hand." Thank you, hands down. Those who do not agree with the decision of the chair, please raise your hands. Thank you, hands down. If the appeal from the decision of the chair sustains the chair, the assembly returns to discussion of the main motion that our class have a cookout. If the appeal from the decision of the chair does not sustain the chair, then the chair must go back and ask for the second on the main motion because that was the original point of order that someone made. And then a second must be received before the main motion can continue. And on this particular motion, a tie vote wins or sustains the chair. Anytime we have a tie vote, if the vote is 5-5, then that action fails with a simple majority vote, except in the case of an appeal, a tie vote actually sustains the chair. And the chair can even cast their vote to make it a tie, to make it sustain the chair. The other incidental motion, and we see this one from time to time, is the motion to suspend the rules. This permits the assembly to do something that violates one of their organizational rules. Motion to suspend the rules. You may not interrupt a speaker, but it does require a second. It cannot be debated and it cannot be amended. It does require a 2/3 vote to pass because we are actually suspending a rule. So that's the rationale in requiring a 2/3 vote. Now, a group can adopt a motion to suspend the rules provided that the proposal does not go against the organization's bylaw or constitution, or against any national laws, state laws, local laws, or against any fundamental principles of parliamentary procedure. So for example, somebody couldn't suspend the rule and say, well, instead of having a fundraiser, let's go rob a bank. Something like that, just as a off the wall kind of topic. It can't be a rule that violates any federal, state, local laws or bylaws of the association.
So I don't get a chance to second that motion
Yes.
about bank robbing. I can't.
Oh, yes. Well, we'd have to have a second on the suspend the rule. Yes. And we do see that one from time to time. I have an example of why we might use that one. And it could be something, for example, that we have a rule in our organization that we can spend no more than $50 without approval of the budget committee. But we have, a member that's in the hospital, we want to send them a $100 gift card because they're having hard times. So we can't do that unless we go through this long, lengthy process of going in front of the budget committee and asking special permission. And this is something that everybody probably wants to do. So someone might make the motion that we suspend the rule that we can spend no more than $50 without going in front of the budget committee. And then if we suspend that rule, then we could go ahead and vote to send a $100 gift card to our friend that's in the hospital. So that's kind of the premise behind suspend the rules. And it does take that 2/3 vote to suspend the rule. And it only suspends it for that one time, unless, it's something that we've suspended for the entire meeting or for this one motion. It's not suspended definitely. It's just for that particular motion that we're on, or if we say, let's suspend this rule for the entire meeting because we have all these budget items. We can't suspend it for life, basically. Oops. And the final one is the division of the assembly. And I think we talked about this some last week. This is when a member doubts the outcome of a vote. Typically on a voice vote, we're not sure if the yeses or the noes had it, and we're sort of in question. And we don't know that the chairman really gave us an accurate count, so I can ask for a division, which means that I'm asking for a more accurate counted vote. So as I mentioned last time, those people who vote yes very meekly say yes, and those that vote no very passionately and loudly vote no on a voice vote. And sometimes it's very hard to differentiate between how many yeses you had and how many no's. That's why when we're taking a voice vote, you should have a pretty good idea that it's going to be unanimous one way or the other. Like if we're having a proclamation that this is going to be, the favorite month of the year or whatever, and we know everybody's going to vote for that, then we can do a voice vote. But if it's something, the budget, we would never take a voice vote on that because we know we're going to have some vote yes, some vote no. As chairman, if I am unsure, I could call for the division on by myself without someone in the audience doing it. So Robert, if you're chairman and you take a voice vote on something that you thought, hey, everybody's going to vote for this, and then you have some people vote no and you're not sure, you can say the chair is unsure of the outcome. I call for a division. We will take another vote. Those in favor this time, please stand. So it could be done by the chairman or by someone in the assembly that's just sitting there participating. So it's fine for the chairman to do that as well if they're unsure. Then we got a few unclassified motions that bring a question back before the assembly. So we have the motion to take from the table, the motion to reconsider, and the motion to rescind. So the motion to take from the table brings back the motion that we previously laid on the table. We talked about lay on the table. It's a subsidiary motion. It's the highest ranking subsidiary motion. We would lay something on the table if we had an urgent matter that we needed to tend to. So we've got to lay this item on the table so we can handle something that's more urgent. And it stays there. It doesn't have a definite time to come back. It comes back only by this motion to take from the table. So if we laid an item on the table, someone in this meeting or the next meeting can make the motion to take it from the table. Now, the one caveat that goes along with this, from the time the original motion was laid on the table, there has to be at least one item of business that was transacted before I can move to take it from the table. Because the main purpose of laying something on the table is we had an urgent, pressing matter we had to tend to. So if we lay it on the table so we can tend to that, you cannot immediately move to take it back off the table unless we had one item of business. The rationale being that, hey, we had something urgent that needed to be taken care of. So we need to at least have one item that took place before we can take it from the table. The motion to take from the table, it does require a second. It is not debatable and it is not amendable. So if we laid a motion on the table that we buy $100 gift card for our friend in the hospital, and then we had something urgent came up, that motion was laid on the table earlier in this meeting. Later on down the list, someone could, Mr. Chairman, I move to take from the table the motion that we buy a $100 gift card for our friend. Is there a second? If you receive a second, you don't ask for discussion. So the motion has been made and properly seconded. Take from the table the motion. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. If it is in the affirmative and we move to take it from the table, then that motion is now back before the assembly, back in its discussion part. And then we are just like that motion was made right now. We're in discussion of that original main motion that was laid on the table. Now it's back off the table. And so we're discussing it. It can be amended, debated, and then we'll vote on it. The other thing to remember about the motion to take from the table and lay on the table is when something is laid on the table, it's not for a definite time period. It doesn't automatically come back. It has to be brought back before the assembly by this motion to take from the table, and it has to be done at this meeting or at the following meeting. If it doesn't happen at the following meeting, then that motion basically goes away. It would have to be remade as a new main motion. It doesn't come up under old business or unfinished business because it is on the table. So if we ever lay something on the table, we need to take note of what it is, and someone needs to remember to take it from the table if that's what the group desires to do. It won't automatically come back. The next unclassified motion that brings an item back is the motion to rescind. Now, the motion to rescind repeals or cancels, basically wipes it out, a previous action or a main motion that is passed at this meeting or at the previous meeting. It does not mean that motions should generally be passed without care and consideration. Just because you changed your mind doesn't mean the rest of the members have. However, as situations change, an organization often needs to change and update its plans and activities. Therefore, this motion is valuable when motions previously passed could hold a charter back from doing new and creative things to make the organization stronger and more effective. Now, the motion to rescind, it does require a second. It is debatable. It is amendable. And I think it requires a 2/3 vote to bring it back. Or actually not to bring it back, but to cancel it out. Okay, let me give you an example of this one. A person in the group addresses and receives recognition from the chairman, and the member states, I move to rescind the motion passed at our April meeting, total picnic in June, since so many of our members will be away on vacation. Is there a second to the motion? Someone seconds the motion. It's been properly moved and seconded to rescind the motion to hold a picnic in June. Is there any discussion? After discussion, we will vote. Okay, this is the one that if no prior notice was given, it does require a 2/3 vote. So all those in favor of rescinding the main motion, you stand to be counted. This is one that we would have to look up in the big book if we ever had this situation, because previous notice can be given and it requires a majority vote to rescind. So for example, if we're an organization that meets monthly, so we have a March, April, June meeting, we pass something like this. In a lot of times it could be a calendar conflict that we were going to do an activity on this date, but now it's going to be in conflict with something that is not going to be in our best interest. So we might put it on the agenda and send out a notice, a notification to members that at our next meeting in April, we're going to have a motion to rescind the motion that we have a picnic in June. If previous notice was given, then it only requires a majority vote to rescind that main motion. And if the motion is rescinded, then it's stricken out and it will not take place. So it's basically like we voted it down. So that's what rescind does. If previous notice was not given, it does require that 2/3. If someone just brings it up, it requires a 2/3 vote. That's the one that's a little tricky depending on if notice was given or if it wasn't, what type of vote it receives. It's kind of unusual in that aspect, or unique. The other motion that's a little similar to it is the motion to reconsider. Purpose of the motion to reconsider is to bring back before the group a motion that has already received a vote, thus making it a possible change on the vote. In a sense, you're seeing if you want to take a revote, basically, on the motion to reconsider. There's a couple of interesting things about the motion to reconsider. It may only be moved by someone who voted on the prevailing or the winning side. So if you voted against the motion and it passed, you were not on the prevailing side. If you voted for it and it failed, you're not on the prevailing side. So you had to vote on the prevailing side to be able to make the motion to reconsider. The motion to reconsider that previously lost must be made during the meeting at which the main motion was introduced. And if the motion passed and was entered in the minutes, it could be made at this meeting or the next meeting. So that one gets a little tricky too. Now, the rationale on if it passed or failed, if it failed at this meeting, at the next meeting, you could just remake that same motion again. So let's say we voted to have a hayride and the motion failed by a vote of 3-7. So at the next meeting, you could not make the motion to reconsider it because it failed at this meeting. So what you could simply do is move to have a hayride again. Now, during this meeting, if it failed, you could still make the motion to reconsider it and bring it back before the group. You might have some new information that might change their mind during discussion. Hey, I found us an alternative location to have our hayride. Instead of going outdoors, we can have an indoor hayride and we don't have to worry about the weather. So therefore, the motion might pass now. So the motion to reconsider does require a second. It is debatable. It is amendable. And it requires a majority vote. Now, if we reconsider the motion, it has the similar effect of bringing something off the table. If we vote to reconsider a motion and we go through all those proper steps and everybody made it that can and all that, when we vote yes to reconsider, we've brought that main motion back in front of the group. So now we're able to discuss it again. We're back in discussion. We have more discussion and then we take another vote on the motion. These are items you don't see used very often, but I wanted y'all to be familiar with them. Take from the table would be used probably more than these others if we laid stuff on the table. Rescind, again, that's the one where we want to strike something out, get rid of it. And reconsider is if we want to bring it back, open for discussion and a revote. Again, they get a little complicated with their peculiars about them. Who can make the motion, the type of vote the motion requires, that sort of thing. I mean, questions about any of our incidental or unclassified motions? So to finish up our motion section in the parliamentary procedure, if y'all recall in our last session, we talked about getting that driver's license when you're about 15 or 16 years old and you were excited and wanted that shiny red car to go cruising town and you thought you knew everything. And then you had that station wagon in that picture. So if we relate that to parliamentary procedure, you are now ready to drive the red car. You've been through all the motions. You have all the knowledge. You have the ability to access it through resources, and you have a leg up on everybody else that's out on the road. So you're ready for the red car. All right, we're going to go ahead and take our break now. Let's do about 7 minutes. That works for y'all. I do have some more topics that we'll cover when we come back. We'll just take us about a 7-minute break. Made it back. Next topic we're going to get into is electronic meetings, as they're commonly referred to as e-meetings. Before last year, some organizations employed them from time to time, with or without permission, perhaps from their group, or without their bylaws allowing it. When Robert's Rules of Order was written back in the 1800s, this wasn't a topic that was included, obviously, in the book. The book was made for assemblies with people meeting in person, so that everyone had the opportunity to speak, everyone had the opportunity to vote. When we talk about e-meetings, there are some pitfalls and some hazards to try to avoid. And a lot of it deals with technology. Not everyone has the internet. Not everyone may have the ability to call in via phone or have a fax machine, or all those technological requirements that comprise our e-meetings could actually disenfranchise members of the group from being able to participate. And that sort of is counter effective of the premise of everyone has the right to speak and has the right to vote. So an overview of our e-meetings, some of the things that we need to talk about are the bylaws. Do they require them? Who can call the meeting? Is there advance notice that should be given? The content of these meetings, items on the agenda, time required to respond, mixed meeting options, what constitutes a quorum, is it different? And rules of debate for e-meetings. So if we look at the type, we have synchronous and asynchronous. A synchronous e-meeting would be when everyone gathers at the same time, but they're in different places. For example, a Zoom, like we're doing tonight, where we're all on here together at the same time. So we must have necessary equipment, whether it's computer, internet, a conference call, that type. And do our bylaws determine what type of e-meeting? Should there be notice given? Longer notice than usual, 2 weeks, a month, 30 days. Is there an option for mixed meetings where some people are actually meeting in person, and then we have some people who are calling in over the phone? And then how do we recognize members during debate? How do we know who's got their hand raised? How do we know who's trying to talk? Those type of things. Are we giving everyone that opportunity of fairness? The other type of meeting is asynchronous. This is something that's not necessarily happening at the same time. For example, if I set up a meeting and we're having an election and you are going to submit your vote via fax or via email, we're not all able to discuss and talk at the same time because we're sending back and forth emails or faxes. So we need to have some rules for that. How long can a motion be considered before we call the end of the voting time? What's the time to cast votes? What are the methods for open or secret voting, like ballot voting? And on these asynchronous meetings, we need to have a start time and a stop time. For example, this meeting might be open for 2 days, where you could send your email response, yes or no, or whatever the case is, by 2 days from now. So those are the two types that we're discussing when we talk about e-meetings. Synchronous, where we're all together in one place, and we're trying to conduct a meeting artificially like we were in person. And then the asynchronous meetings, which actually predated a lot of these synchronous meetings, where we use fax machines, we used email, that type of technology. And these are some of the different examples: teleconferencing, telephone conferencing, video, chat rooms. Of course, the Zoom brand has taken off in the last year. We've used it already quite a bit in my organization, just for trainings and things, not necessarily, business meetings. But I do realize that a lot of businesses employ Zoom as a tool and Zoom has become very popular. But you always need to consider those folks that do not have the ability, whether it be through no internet, no computer, bad connection, different things. And we always want to remember that in an association or organization, that the rights of the member to speak and vote are very important. And we don't want to disallow them to participate because they don't have a computer or they don't have high-speed internet or something like that. The other one that I became familiar with years ago was a group I worked with. They wanted to do a lot of faxes back and forth because it was difficult to get their board members together. So the executive director of this group would quiz me all the time about how can we do a vote over fax? And it's not the ideal situation. If you're serving on a board and you don't have the time to come to a meeting, then perhaps you shouldn't be serving on the board, was my typical answer for this individual. Because if you're faxing in an answer or a response to something, you don't have the opportunity to discuss as a group, to come to a group consensus, or someone point out something that you didn't realize, have all the facts before you make your decision to vote. So the preference is always for in-person meetings for discussion and voting versus any type of electronic meeting. These are some guidelines, at least 48 hours for a conference call in advance. The members should still seek recognition from the chair before they try to speak to the entire group. One way that that can happen is the technology person or the chairman can have control of a Zoom type meeting where they give access to who's talking. They can mute everyone and let one person talk at a time. So there is some technology gains in that aspect. And a person should always identify themselves in an electronic meeting before they begin to speak. Some people are on phones, some people are on computers where we might can see each other. But think about those conference calls that we've all probably participated in. Sometimes it's hard to tell who's speaking. So you should always identify, this is Michael Berry. I just wanted to comment that, the voting cards or the time cards that we discussed, I think that's a great idea, but we should always identify ourselves. And the only way through conference calls or telephone calls that we can vote is by voice vote. With the use of Zoom and some of these other platforms, we could possibly vote through the chat room. We could use the polls. So there are becoming more and more alternative ways to vote. And at any time that we do have an electronic meeting, we should have those minutes to be read and approved at the next face-to-face meeting. Now, if we're having an email meeting, and again, this can get very tedious and you have email chains and it's hard to have a consensus discussion, but we do need to have a longer start and stop time for the meeting, perhaps a week for responses or whatever the case is, depending on the issue. And the meeting is an ongoing process because it's not all happening at the same time. Again, with these groups, we should have someone designated as the speaker, the administrative assistant, the Committee on Resolutions and Special Rules Committee. We should establish a proposed timeline for discussing and acting on the motion, determine the process for discussing and acting on resolutions and motions, and discuss the process for submission of secondary motions. So this would be one of those examples where we might want to have those motions written out before we actually got on the Zoom and started talking, if that's what we're going to do. Instead of someone just bringing it up, it might help alleviate some of the confusion. How the pros do e-meetings. When we put this together in my group, I said, pros don't do e-meetings. Specify format regarding the posting of an electronic message as it relates to resolution or motion. Identify who's permitted to post a message, if this is like in a chat. Set specific voting period, outline the appeal process, and we need to set a quorum. whether it's different. Now, when we talked about this a few years ago, my opinion, I try to stick to what Robert's Rules of Order states. They're very limited on electronic meetings. The main focus is for groups to meet in person and to discuss their ideas and for everyone to have an opportunity to talk. Anything that limits that ability is not part of the democratic process. So any type of e-meeting you have, you're always limiting someone through some device, whether it's technology or whatever the case may be. So that is not the best avenue. Now, because of last year's situation, a lot of businesses had to business meetings had to be conducted through electronic meetings. My recommendation to a few groups I worked with last year, your bylaws need to define what you can and cannot do in electronic meetings. And I actually worked with some groups last year on redoing their bylaws to include electronic meetings, because your bylaws need to stipulate how we conduct electronic meetings, when they're held, what notice there is given, what format we're going to use, all those details to make it fair and equitable for everyone. Sometime last spring, the governor in Tennessee passed some executive order that allowed businesses to conduct official government business and associations through e-meetings. So that sort of trumped what bylaws that an organization might have and made it where they could, do official business. But I would still recommend to an organization, the best is in person. And if you're going to do e-meetings, I would do them on a very infrequent basis. And I would adjust my bylaws of the group to make it reflective of how that they're to be held so that everyone understands. And they are going to become more commonplace, so an organization really needs to address that. And that takes us into our policies and bylaws. Sometimes when you have that red car, if you're not following the rules of the road, someone helps remind you what those rules of the road are. And that's what our bylaws and policies help us do as an organization. So this is a true false. We haven't had enough tests in this group, I don't think. So we're going to do them for as a group. But this is a true false. As long as an organization has a set of bylaws, they are exempt from all federal and state laws. Is that true? Thumbs up. Is that false? Thumbs up.
That's false.
That is false. That is correct. False is the correct answer. Here's the hierarchy of governing documents. Federal laws in our country overrule everything. Then we get down into state laws, state statutes, and then an organization's articles of incorporation, the governing documents of the parent organization, and then the organization's constitution and bylaws. Below those are special rules of order they might have, the parliamentary authority, which in most situations is Robert's Rules of Order, any standing rules, and then any policies and procedures. So I have bylaws highlighted in red because that's basically the working part of a constitution that sets up the rules that our organization is going to follow. Another true false. A very common practice for organizations is to combine their constitution with their bylaws. Think that's true?
I
It's
think
false?
it's true. I don't think it's the proper way to do it, but I think the statement's true.
It is true. We refer to them a lot as constitution and bylaws. They're usually followed right back to back in that organization's paperwork. But there are some differences in what is a constitution and what is a bylaw. And that's what this slide is going to direct us to. That's what we want to recognize and understand what those differences are. Now, typically a constitution, we'll go over it first. It covers the fundamental principles of the organization, the purpose and the function of the organization. It's often combined, like we just said, into a single document with the bylaws. It mentions the type of organization it is, whether it's incorporated or unincorporated. Typically, the Constitution is very rarely changed. It should not be written to be changed. It should set forth what we're doing as an organization. The bylaws are the specific rules for how the organization functions. They often include policies on conflict. The number of articles are determined by the size and the activities of the organization. Bylaws can be changed if it is stated in the bylaws how they are to be changed, and that should also be stated in the bylaws. The articles or headers of bylaws are denoted with Roman numerals such as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. True or false? True? Yes. Robert's Rules of Order goes into specifics on how to write bylaws. I've worked with a couple of organizations on helping them from start on writing bylaws, and a lot of folks want to change bylaws, and we go into that. But this is what Robert's Rules of Order lists as a common template for bylaws. You know, Article 1 is the name, Article 2, the purpose or the objective of the group. Article 3 is membership. Then we have officers, meetings, executive board committees, the parliamentary authority, and that final one is amendment of bylaws, because we do want to make it where we can change them if needed. So let's look at each of these. When we talk about membership, it should denote, you know, the maximum number of members, if that's applicable. For example, if it's a county, you know, government body that says 24 commissioners or 40 council members or 12 commissioners, something like that. Membership eligibility and admission procedure. You know, if this is a teacher organization, it's open to all, you know, members of the school system if they pay their $5 dues, something like that. Dues and fees should be mentioned. Resignation from membership should also be mentioned. And honorary life membership, if that's something we do. Voting privileges should be mentioned. If we have regular members and affiliate members or student members, something like that, we might want to list that, you know, all regular members have voting rights. Student members may attend meetings, but they do not have voting privileges, something like that. If it's a group that, you know, is mixed with different classification of members. We should list our officers and their duties, how they're nominated, perhaps, the time of the election, their length of office, their removal from office, their office holding limitations. So if we're a group that, you know, elects annual officers in November and they serve from January through December of the following year, then that needs to be spelled out. All those parameters, if we have a president and a president-elect and a secretary, and it lists the duties that they are required to do. This should all be listed under this part of the bylaws. We should list our meetings, our regular meetings. If we meet monthly or annual meeting, perhaps we have one large annual meeting a year. How special meetings are to be handled, if they're held on the call of the president. And what is that quorum? What is a voting quorum that is established for our group? If it's half the membership or, you know, 2/3 of the members, whatever the case may be. This is also where I would list electronic meetings, how they can be held, and their obligations need to go in this section. And a lot of organizations need to update and put that in this part of their bylaws. The executive board, that's usually a board that, you know, is a smaller subgroup that makes a lot of decisions. They perhaps meet more frequently than the entire membership, so they can make some decisions for the entire group if their duties and powers allow them to, and that needs to be listed. Needs to list who's on the board, you know, if that's made up of the officers, or if we're electing board members. There's 6 board members, you know, whatever the case may be, and how often the board meetings are held. So that needs to be spelled out. Any committees that we might have, these will be standing committees, such as a finance committee, or a program committee, or an entertainment committee. Depending on the type of organization we have, we need to have those committees spelled out as far as the names of the committees and what they are going to do during the year. We'll learn more in our next section of committees, if they even need to be listed here, because these are standing committees that function all the time because we have enough of a purpose that they need to be an ongoing committee forever. If it's a committee that doesn't do anything, we don't have a purpose for them, then it doesn't need to be listed in our bylaws. We need to list our parliamentary authority, so we know where to look for the rules that we're following. In most situations, it's Robert's Rules of Order. And then the final item is our provision for how we can amend the bylaws. How can we change these bylaws? So the provision should be included in the bylaws about how to change them. There should be previous notice should be given in a specified manner, and if it requires a 2/3 vote to approve the amendment. I'm a part of an organization that's meeting the first week of May. We're meeting May the 6th. We are an affiliate of a national organization, and the national organization has changed their name in the last year. So our bylaws are reflective that we are, a part of this national organization. Well, since they've changed their name, that makes our bylaws out of date. So we now have to update our bylaws. So there's a provision in our bylaws that says in order to change a bylaw at an annual meeting, we have to give a 30-day written notice to all the members. So that notice was sent out this morning that we're going to update our bylaws, if the group votes on it, to be reflective of the new name of the national organization that we're a part of. And since that previous notice was given, it will only require a majority vote in our organization. In some organizations, if there's no previous notice given, it might require a 2/3 vote of the entire membership, but it should be spelled out how to change the bylaws and the vote taken. All right, our next quiz. Bylaws should be written as detailed as possible to restrict membership in such a way to ensure that things run smoothly as possible. True or false? True? False. False, yes. Bylaws should not be restrictive. They should be, instead of being as detailed as possible, they should be as generic as possible. That's one of the most common requests I get from groups. They don't ask me to come and run their meeting. They ask about how they can change their bylaws because they have a bylaw that's prohibiting them from doing something that they want to do now, because they have some old language in their bylaws perhaps, and it's not been updated, and it might state that they can't do something or they can only do this, and they're wanting to change it. So I work with groups a lot on bylaw revisions. So don't make them very restrictive. One of the groups I worked with a few years ago, a former colleague, she's now part of a veterans cemetery group, which sounds like a very good organization over in the Upper Cumberland area. And I was reviewing their bylaws because they needed to change a few things, even though they were a newly constructed group. When their bylaws, they listed their board members with their names and addresses. And I asked her, why did you do that? Or what was the purpose of that? And she said, well, we want everybody to know who the board members are. I said, yes, but that's in the bylaws now and you can't change them. So every time your board rotates off or someone dies, you have to vote to update the bylaws because you've listed everybody's name and address as board members as one of your bylaws. So you want to be as generic and not restrictive in your bylaws, because in most organizations, it does take a little bit of effort to get these changed. And you don't want to be changing them very often unless you need to. But you do want to review them regularly to be sure that they're still applicable and up to date, so we don't run into a situation where this has been on the books for years and we've never followed it, or this is really out of date, something like that. So we have some simple do's and don'ts. Some do's, they should cover the issues. We need to review them periodically. Avoid contradictory statements. We need to revise and proofread, and all members should be provided a copy. Don'ts, we don't want to use specific terminology that restricts our ability to effectively run the group. We don't want to use bylaws that are susceptible to two meanings. And we don't want to forget that state law supersedes any law that our organization might have. So we can't put anything in there that's contradictory to state law. Let's look at our nominations and elections, because I think every group has some form of election, because we all have officers of some degree. And there's some things that we can learn from the nomination process and election process to make it fair, equitable for everyone involved. We have some different ways for nominations. They could come from a committee. If we have a nominating committee, they could come from the floor, the chair, ballots, mail, petition. Depending on what our organization states, there's a lot of ways we can get nominations. Oops. Drop my pen. So if we do have a nominating committee, this should be spelled out in the bylaws under the committee section. There should be rules for their specific role, forms used by the committee, candidate qualification list. And we need to be ensured that those candidates meet the qualifications for office. If they can nominate themselves from the committee. Yeah, this slide doesn't do good. Go back up. Had a jumbled up slide there, so we're just going to talk a little bit about how the nomination process works. If we do have a nominating committee and they bring forth a list of nominees for our offices, they typically should only bring one person per office instead of bringing multiple people. That was the purpose of the committee, to narrow it down. We can always have nominations from the floor. So if we have a nominating committee report and they bring forth, this list of candidates for these offices, the chairman, after receiving that nominating committee report during the election, should then ask, are there any further nominations from the floor? When we do vote for nominations or for offices, it's typically best to vote by ballot. So if we have a nominating committee report, they can have those ballots pre-printed. And in most situations, unless it specifically states they can't, we can always have write-in ballots or a write-in candidate that's not even on any of the list. So if we are using a ballot, a single ballot, in a situation where our bylaws don't dictate any differently, in order to be elected to an office, an individual should be elected by a majority vote. And again, that's out of the majority of those who submit a vote. In some instances, it says the person receiving the most votes. So if that's the way the organization functions, it needs to stipulate that in the bylaws, because Robert's Rules of Order will default to you must receive a majority vote for that office. So if we have multiple people running for an office, more than two, and no one receives a majority vote, if the vote is 7 to 6 to 5, no one received a majority, then we have to recast ballots for that particular office until someone receives a majority vote. And
Michael,
yes.
I just
Go
have
ahead.
a quick question to clarify. This is a majority of those voting, not a majority of those eligible to vote, right?
Correct.
Thank you.
Correct. And that's always the way we're going to handle any voting situation. It's not the number eligible. It's not the number sitting in the audience. It's the number that actually votes. Because some people may not choose to vote on a motion or an election because they want to abstain. So if we have 15 votes submitted and someone receives 6 and someone receives 5 and someone receives 6 and 5, 4, no one has a majority because they would need 8 votes of the 15. So we would have to re-vote for that officer. Candidates are not dropped off the lists. The person receiving the least votes. So we would vote continually until we received a majority. That one is spelled out pretty good in your Robert's Rules of Order newly revised on elections, because I refreshed myself on it today, because every group is a little different when we talk about government. So if we think about the president of the United States, for example, they do not have to receive a majority vote. We have rules that allow for the person who receives the most electoral college votes. In Nashville, the city council, they do not follow Robert's Rules of Order in this, but they do have runoffs. And when they have runoffs, they drop candidates off the list until someone receives that majority. And in a situation where they have 5 people who serve as at large, you only have to receive 20% of the vote, not 50% of the vote. That's kind of peculiar, but they have it spelled out so they know. But it's basically would be sort of in their bylaws or their charter amendments. So if your organization functions according to Robert's Rules of Order, then you need to follow what it is in the book, and everyone must receive a majority vote to serve in office. The voice vote used in mass meetings or when an election is not strongly contested. Useful when we usually just have that one person nominated. A lot of times it's difficult to get people to serve in the role of an officer. And if we have one person that, they've already solicited some votes, they've announced that they want to run for it and no one else is nominated, we can do a simple voice vote to vote them in. If we do a roll call vote, if it's a small group, are you voting for person A or person B? They could declare which one they're voting for. And the cumulative vote is what I mentioned earlier, like Nashville with their council members at large. This is a position held by multiple individuals. This allows minority groups to coordinate election of one of their own. This violates the rule of 1 vote per person on a question. So if you have perhaps 2 representatives, you might get to vote twice out of a list of 5 candidates, something like that. So that's what that refers to when you get to vote for more than one person or more than 1 vote. Sometimes we do have those situations where you have 2 representatives that serve you and you can vote for 2 of them. But voting can, or elections can get a little tricky. So if I was conducting an election, I would read that chapter in this book ahead of time. So I was familiar with it. I'd use this as a resource. It's a pretty good little piece in chapter 8 and 9 about nominations and elections to make you familiar with some of the peculiars. And again, it's always going to default to your organization's rules if you have any special bylaws about elections. Contesting elections. I'm not real familiar with this topic, but to hold an office immediately becomes final if it's not declined by the candidate. So the new officer takes immediate possession of the office unless the bylaws dictate otherwise. Contesting of election results is possible through a process. Typically, we don't see those unless you're in, some of the larger government type situations and they have their own rules of how that happens. But if after we have an election, the people who are elected to that office take that role immediately unless the bylaws state differently. And the example I gave earlier was we have an election at our November meeting for our officers, and those officers serve January through December the following year. So that would be an example of they have that specified timeline, and that's when they would take over. Otherwise, they take over immediately after the election, unless your bylaws dictate that their term of service. And finally, we're going to look at committees. Committee is a group of one or more people that are appointed or elected to carry out a specific task for their organization. Their specific task could be just to investigate, or they could be there to make a recommendation or to take some action as appointed by the chair or however they are elected. There is a difference in committees and boards. Boards are usually assigned a particular function on behalf of the assembly, government organization, and committees are a breakout group, typically a small group of an assembly. They may be appointed with power, meaning that they have the authority to get something done if they choose to. They should be responsible for preliminary work. They should have some flexibility, and informality are allowed in these small committee meetings in regards to parliamentary procedure. They typically don't have regular meetings unless they have action to do. Committees could be appointed through several different ways. They could be elected by a ballot. They could be nominated from people from the floor. The chair could appoint them. Lots of different ways you can get put on the committee. And these are the two main types of committees: standing committees and special committees. Standing committees are those committees that have a function all the time. They should be listed in the bylaws. When we were on the bylaw section, I mentioned that those type of committees were standing committees. We might have a budget committee. We might have an audit committee. We might have an entertainment committee or a program committee. They should do the function that they're listed in their bylaws to get the work done that it lists. Special committees are those that come about with a need that's not covered under one of the standing committees. A special committee only serves the purpose of getting that item done. Once it is finished, they are complete. For example, if we wanted to purchase some land to build a new building for our group, instead of the whole group talking about that, because that doesn't make sense for 100 people to sit there and talk about, well, we need a surveyor and we got to, pay for a perk test, and we've got to get some architectural plans and this and that. So it could be better accomplished with a small group of 5 or 7 people to work and come up with these different solicitations of what we need to do to acquire this land. So the special committee would meet to work and get that finished. Once it is finished and we bought the land, then that committee no longer functions. Okay, that's the role of a special committee. That was a one-time thing we just needed them to do. Once they finish their task, they are complete. As opposed to standing committees like the entertainment committee. We're going to have entertainment at every monthly meeting. So we have a committee designated to find those people who can come and entertain us at every meeting. And I just said a lot of what this slide is. Standing committee members are typically appointed for a term. It might be a 1-year or 2-year term. They should be giving at least one report at our annual meeting. And again, that should be outlined in the bylaws. While the members' terms may end, the committee work continues unless the committee is dissolved. And that's a standing committee. The special committee, again, exists for that special purpose, reports on an as-needed basis, does not necessarily give a report at an annual meeting, and it will cease to exist when that final report has been given. Committees function differently than the entire group. They have different rules of debate, which we discussed last week when we were talking about debate, where people only may talk 2 times for up to 10 minutes each on a particular topic. In committees, there is no limit. There are some different rules in Robert's Rules of Order. For example, it would be out of order to make a motion to limit debate in the committee. You can't do it. They have unbridled authority to speak as much, and everyone gets to speak as often or as long as they need to get that work done. So committees do have some special rules that sort of govern them. They should be listed about who can call the meeting. Meetings can be called by members who are not the chair. The chair usually acts as secretary in those meetings. They have some modifications of regular parliamentary procedure. And the chairman actually is usually the most active person in discussion and in the work of the committee. And if you think about how some of these organizations work, if you think about our government entities where we have a budget committee, for example, typically the person who's that budget chairman, they're there for a reason. They might have a background in finance or have a real working knowledge of budgets. And that's why they were appointed chairman of that budget committee. So they're going to take a real active role in leading that discussion and getting that budget done. It's different than in the group assembly meeting where the chairman typically would not participate in discussion. In committee work, that is something that's definitely needed, is that chairman is going to be an active participant and discuss. And again, motions to close or limit debate are not permitted. And if we ever have a motion that comes out of committee in front of the entire group, that motion would be brought, and it does not require a second in the main assembly, because coming out of committee, it came out of a group of more than one person. So if a committee brought forth a motion that we should buy that land that we discussed for $1 million at our business meeting of the entire assembly, you know, when they ask for a committee report, they give the report and say, therefore, this committee moves that we buy this parcel of land for $1 million. And that motion would not require a second because it did come from a committee. They can adopt some of their own rules as created in the bylaws. What else? Committee is making recommendations that must give members of the society an opportunity to appear before the committee and present views on the subject. Again, a lot of this is like in government where we might have a budget hearing and let other members come and listen and present ideas to the committee who are not necessarily on the committee, but they're a member of the assembly. Only committee members may be present during actual deliberations of the committee. The committee cannot impose any penalty, but instead report the incident to the parent assembly. Some other items on committees are adjournment. They could simply adjourn. There's a adjourn sine die, which means finish for the day. And then to discharge a committee will be a formal motion that they would employ to actually do away with the committee itself. Adjourn sine die it means the committee is finished with all of its business and it's basically dissolved. So I would study up on my committees a little bit if I were leading an organization to be sure that I had those committee appointments correct on those standing committees, to be sure that the terms are being met when people rotate off. Sometimes they all rotate off at one time. Sometimes they're staggered if it's multiple years, where half may rotate off on odd number of years, half on even number of years. So just be sure that they're up to date and that they're getting appointed when the bylaws say. And I guess I would be remiss if I didn't mention how important bylaws are. And in any organization that you're a part of, especially if you're a part of an officer group or an executive board or participating in meeting, very, very important to be familiar with those bylaws and know what they say the group cannot do, what they're set up for, and to be sure that you have a copy of that to readily access, just to be sure that, we're not in violation. Because sometimes the bylaws might, for example, have money items in there that we can't spend more than $10,000 without, board approval or whatever. And so we'd want to know that during our business meeting if someone brought up a situation where, we should spend $20,000. Well, if it's in violation of our bylaws, then we need to be familiar with that enough to catch that during that meeting. So I've sort of went through the final parts of what I had for tonight, our tidbits with committees, e-meetings, and finished those final unclassified and incidental motions. Do y'all have any questions, situations we want to discuss? Robert?
Ladies first.
Amy?
I didn't have any that I could think of off the top of my head. Sorry.
No, I thought you were going to ask. It's been suggested to me by some of my acquaintances that prior to taking over as chair, if I wanted to understand parliamentary procedure more, I should attend local committee, local government type meetings. Here's my concern, and I just want your opinion. I'm not going to tell you where I live, no offense.
I mailed you a book. I know where you live, so
Oh, that's true. Well, let me say it this way. I don't want to learn the wrong stuff. So, if I go down to blah, blah, blah city council and they're acting like a bunch of monkeys, I don't want to learn monkey traits. What would you suggest in that?
I would go. You get more experience and exposure by going to as many meetings as you can. Maybe not going in there to learn exactly what they're doing, but just sort of follow along and see if you can catch some errors maybe that they're doing. And governments function quite a bit different than regular business meetings because so many government entities have some different quirky rules that they follow, especially when it comes to elections. The way some of their committees function, different things like that. The situation I was referring to earlier when I sat in on some county commission meetings, it was the open entire county court meeting where they had a public audience, and I knew that they were doing some errors with their parliamentary procedure, and the chairman referred to the county attorney who was serving as their parliamentarian, and he gave the wrong answer. So, I just thought, well, they, don't any of them know. So, that's fine. The issue becomes in any organization that you're a part of, you should always try to follow correct parliamentary procedure and follow your bylaws and constitution. People who are in leadership positions are liable, to the entire membership if we're doing things incorrectly. So you want to always try to follow the rules as much as possible in terms of parliamentary authority. But yeah, I would recommend, I enjoy going to different business meetings from time to time and hearing, some of the things that they're doing and just catching on. It's difficult when you watch state government and federal government on TV because they have so many different types of rules that don't follow Robert's Rules of Order. For example, on the debate, they can yield their time to the speaker, because they can take their time that they didn't use in discussion and give it to somebody else. And you can't do that in ordinary Robert's Rules of Order societies. So, it is interesting to watch them function. So I would recommend you go, or at least watch them online. A lot of them are doing them online now. You can watch a lot of, especially government meetings online. And, you have to be a quick thinker to know if they did something right or wrong. So if you're watching it, you're not going to pick up any bad habits, but you might pick up some tendencies to think, if I was leading that meeting, I probably wouldn't have said that, or I might would have done that a little differently, or I might would have been more tactful. Because some of the more heated discussions you will see are in government. especially county or city governments, where some of those members just really don't like each other. And you can see them go at it. And sometimes they're not very tactful about the way they do it. And, at times you think the chairman needs to really take control of this meeting and take the personal business out of it and keep it to the business of what they're doing. And so that might be, worth going just to find out some ways that you might be a better chairman by watching someone. And if you watch someone who's really good too, you can pick up a lot of those good pointers and think, oh, wow, that was really a neat way that they handled that or that they did that. I've sat in some meetings with some great chairmen and I thought, oh, he or she is just really smooth and I like the way they handled that. And that's really good. And, it gives that impression or that ambiance of this person is in control. They know what's going on just by the way they handle the meeting. Yes, Amy.
Well, I'm not sure when you actually take your role, Robert, as chair of your committee, but my company, Tennessee Medical Association, is having a live stream on May 22nd on our YouTube channel. And it's technically not a board meeting. It is our House of Delegates. So it's a much larger forum. And it's first half of the day is basically our Speaker of the House, which is also like technically the chair of the meeting. He will be doing passing off reports from the CEO, reports from the president, reports to the secretary treasurer. But the second half is where we actually have the debate. And that would probably be around, I think 1 o'clock until about 4:30. And that's where literally the debate from the floor happens, that there's a motion made, a second, and then there's debate, and then there's debate in favor, and then there's debate against, and then finally someone will call the question because it gets out of control. And so they usually end up having somebody, they'll call the question and everyone will go to vote. And we actually have tellers on the floor that sometimes will count. We have 3 different tellers and they'll count the votes if it looks close. Or we actually haven't, we've done, trying to think, electronic vote via text. We've registered everybody through a portal that I think it's called Poll Everywhere or Poll Now. And then we literally will show it up on our screen how the poll is actually working. So I can probably share you our YouTube page. I saw you sent me your email, but if sure, it would be definitely a little bit way formal. I'm not sure how yours goes, but
Well, I appreciate the offer, and yes, my email address is what's called a hint. But my the forum that I'm talking about is a Senate at a college. It's the faculty senate of a college, and it's been likened to herding cats. I'm sure Michael's heard that before. But when you get a room full of folks with PhDs next to their name, everybody thinks they know everything and everybody wants to take control of the meeting. And I just, the person who's doing it now does a really good job, but they are not an army of one. They have easily half the Senate behind them. I don't. I will be an army of about 3. So I'm going to need to control this meeting. I already know. And the answer to your inquiry, Amy, was I take office in August.
Yeah, Amy, I may join in on the YouTube and watch that. That sounds interesting.
yeah, I got your email. I'll
Yeah.
shoot you guys.
Yeah.
So I did a hybrid meeting of similar back in July of last year. Normally it's go up to about 230 people. They're all physicians in Tennessee. And what our House of Delegates is our legislative making body of our association. So pretty much any resolutions that get submitted the following year, our lobbyists will go on behalf of our physicians here in Tennessee and try to lobby on their behalf for whatever, like say tanning beds, like try to restrict tanning to 18 and older, no minors, stuff like that, or banning
Right.
vaping pens, or, just random legislation.
Sure.
It's, we've been around since 1830, so it is.
That makes a lot more sense to me now about your organization and what they do. So that, yeah, I could really see their purpose there with, trying to get laws established statewide, not just out of that organization, but yeah, for the benefit of the health of people. That,
Yeah.
very good.
I just
Not
realized my comment about PhDs means nothing to Amy. She's got a bunch of MDs around her.
Yeah, 230 doctors and
Yeah.
a lot of medical students too. So the students are and I guess this is my boss, we joke around about this, but we're trying very hard for diversity in our board as well as our membership. But it's been a running joke. My predecessor, she used to say they're PMS, pale, male, and stale. So they're mostly older white men, and I would say majority of the folks who do come to our House of Delegates are 65 plus, maybe even, like some folks are coming in wheelchairs and walkers, but they are the most active members, and we're trying to get the students involved. And it's but then they're very helpful, and they're learning a lot. So
Very good. Well, as I mentioned, if I can be of assistance to you all in your endeavors, send me an email, give me a call, whatever. I'll be glad to help out in any capacity that you might request. And as we finish up, I'm going to send out a survey sometime tomorrow, and it may be the next day, just about your thoughts on the class, how it went, if you gained much knowledge by participating, and what you might think about future considerations for this same type of class. So be honest with your feedback. You won't hurt my feelings at all. If the instructor was horrible, mention that, but I really have enjoyed the discussions that we've had. I think y'all have an upper advantage on your peers by participating in some of this. And the thing that I always try to do is, if I know I'm going in a situation, I study up a little bit ahead of time. So use your book to, come election time, read that section on elections and get ready. And, whatever the case may be, just try to be as prepared as you can. And yeah, Robert, I like your suggestion of watching as many different types of meetings as you can. And don't necessarily worry about picking up some bad habits. It'd be worth it just to watch, so you know what their bad habits are, so you can avoid them. So absolutely. All right, y'all have anything else before we finish up? Well, great. I'll be sending y'all a survey over email, and y'all have been just a joy on Monday nights for me for the last few weeks. Y'all have a good rest of the evening, and look forward to hearing from y'all in the future.
Yeah.
thank you.
Okay.